Hello, everyone. This is Caitlin Stippa at East Lansing Public Library. And today I have Rebecca Krans with us. She is a consumer horticulture educator, and she works out of the Iron County office for MSU Extension. So she is up north, and she is going to be talking to us today about gardening in our zone. And I did look us up here. If you're watching from East Lansing, we are in zone 5, but Michigan has lots of other zones in it. So let's see, Rebecca will be sharing her screen with us, and then I'll hopefully be pulling out.
Yes, thanks, Caitlin. Appreciate your introduction. Get my slideshow coming up here. And hopefully you can see that.
Yes, I can.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so thank you again for the invite to talk more about vegetable gardening, specifically in your zone. I'll be giving you a lot of different resources, and I also included cool and warm tips for planting success, because some vegetables enjoy cooler temperatures, some like warmer temperatures. So we'll talk about that. And as Caitlin mentioned, I am a consumer horticulture educator, part of a statewide team at Michigan State University Extension. And I am stationed in the Upper Peninsula there, and help to coordinate Extension Master Gardeners. And we, again, have a team of us educators across the state that does that. So welcome and thanks for joining us today. We did have a poll question just to get started as far as what is your vegetable gardening experience. Always good to know, you know, what your experience is, and just asking, you know, your experience, and so we can close that out now. Okay, thanks. So I'd like to always begin with beginner tips, even if there may be some advanced people or people that have gardened before. I always like to remind myself too, but especially for beginners, we want you to start small and find success when you're vegetable gardening. So an analogy here, think of, you know, your dinner or kitchen room versus the size of your kitchen room table. Always best to, as a beginner, focus on the table size rather than the room size. Those that are advanced can, you know, expand to the room. Some might have double, more than one room size. At this top photo here shows a really nice example of how you can garden in a very small area. This is just used pet bags, feed bags that are rolled over, a nice mixture, soil mixture placed in here, and I simply seeded some nice lettuce on the left and bok choy on the right, and I can have these right outside on my deck. Very convenient for harvesting. So any small space you can start to garden. Definitely choose what you like. You know, you'll be able to eat a lot of fresh. And then if you want extra, look at those to preserve as well. Always consider your location. Very important for vegetables. Most vegetables, especially the fruiting ones, they're going to need at least 8 hours of sunlight. I know up here in the Upper Peninsula, any place above the 45 latitude is going to need those 8 hours. Maybe in the Lansing you could get away with 6 hours just because the sun is a little more intense. And then convenience, make your garden area or your containers where you're going to have your vegetables convenient to get to. And then also always think of a water source, especially if you have containers. You're going to have to be supplying the water, not just relying on Mother Nature. But even in your garden, make sure that you're able to get to a water source. And then going to point out some easier options for you too, like greens are one of the easier ones to grow. Any leaf lettuce, spinach, kale, any of those are very easy for beginners. Green beans are easy too. We could plant those seeds, we say direct seed, right out in your garden when the temperatures are right. I'll talk more about that. Tomatoes are relatively easy. Use transplants that you might have started or purchased from a local garden center. Peas are direct seeded outside, and then broccoli, anything in the broccoli family like cabbage, kohlrabi, those are relatively easy too to start as beginners. And again, using transplants or small seedlings, plants to plant out is a great start for you. So one important thing to consider is the last frost date. And I know that there's been snow and colder temperatures in the lower peninsula from context calls that I've had, and we've had colder temperatures in the UP too. So even though we want to maybe move forward with, planting, it's still not past our last anticipated frost date. And these are anticipated. Again, flukes can occur. So I did highlight here Lansing, you can see. And if you go way over to the right, this last column is the very last anticipated frost date for your area. And it's, June 12th. That is the very last one. This column here to the left of that, May 17th, there's a 25% chance still that there might be a frost. So, we still need to be careful, especially for those crops that like it warm, to be planting anything outside, before these dates. And I just wanted to give you some comparison to Iron Mountain, which is closer to where I am here, where we're showing a very last expected maybe of June 22nd for that. Typically, a lot of times around Memorial Day, we say that it's pretty safe for you to put at least the warm season crops outdoors. So this is available on our website, and I'll be sharing that with you too. But if you just simply Google Gardening in Michigan website, that resource will pop up. And here's one part of that. This is also, this is what our Gardening in Michigan website looks like. I simply have clicked on vegetable gardening here. You can see where you can also sign up for a weekly newsletter with different articles. So a great resource for you to learn more about vegetable gardening as well. And I have the website highlighted up here as well. We have a lot of great tip sheets, as this is just an introduction to growing vegetables in your zone, and preparing your garden site where soil is very important. The foundation, here's a tip sheet noting that. And we had another poll. If you've ever gotten your soil tested, we can just keep going on with that. One of our key smart messages is don't guess soil tests. So if you have never gotten a soil test, we would highly suggest that you do that. At MSU, it is $25 for that investment. And I would say well worth what you are going to get out of that. You're going to get what your soil results are, the top nutrient levels, the pH, which is very important, the amount of organic matter that you have, and then on your information sheet, you're going to select vegetables because that's what you want your recommendations for. And you will get specific recommendations that will be how to improve or amend your soil specifically for vegetables. So you can get that most conveniently is online due to COVID regulations still, homesoiltest.msu.edu. Once you take your soil sample, it takes about 2 weeks to get back your results. And now is still a great time as we prepare for our planting to get this soil test done. You just simply have to, take some multiple 6-inch soil samples from your garden area, put them in a plastic bucket, mix them up, and you'll only need about a cup to put in a plastic bag that comes in this postage paid mailer. And that goes, you can put that right in the mail. And again, like I said, it takes about 2 weeks for you to get back your results and recommendations. So as spring is approaching and or here, and so garden centers are open. You can get and purchase some transplants if you haven't started them yourself. This photo here is a great example of healthy roots. You want to see those white roots. They are encircling, because this was in a plastic cell. So before you plant these, you want to use a knife or even your finger to loosen up these roots. So it's going to make them spread out rather than just continuing to circle around. Healthier roots are going to spread out and be able to absorb more water, etc. So look for, nice green coloring on the top for your transplants. I'll talk more about hardening off in a little bit. Make sure that they have a nice water. Oftentimes you might find some that are dry. That's going to cause stress. So look for those that have been adequately watered. And then, yeah, you can gently, tap any of these out of their cell to look at their roots. Make sure that they don't have brown or mushy roots that would indicate rot and unhealthy. We do suggest that you avoid the overlarge or plants that have fruit, maybe flowers on them already, especially if you're going to transplant these plants into a garden space because they have already put their energy into creating that fruit and you want them to now produce roots again. So removing that fruit or that flower will help them, go back to putting more strength and energy into developing additional roots. Now, there are some transplants, that or plants that are large already. Maybe they already have a tomato on them and you're just going to keep it in that large container that it comes in. That's okay. You would keep, the fruit on there already. There's a lot of different retail options that are out there. But if you're buying, smaller transplants that come in the 6-packs or the 4-packs, that's when you would remove the flowers and the fruit. And then maybe some have 2 plants in one of here. Maybe an extra seed got dropped in, and that's okay because you'll have 2 for the price of 1. You can just carefully, divide this plug, trying to get some roots with each of the little transplants here. And as far as hardening off, if you're not familiar with that, most of these transplants are being grown inside in a protected environment, and they're not used to, being out in the full sun or in wind. And so what we suggest is that you allow them to go through 7 to 10 days of period of hardening off before you plant them in your garden directly. So for example, the first day, you're just going to select a part sunny area, and in the morning, maybe for 1 hour, just place them out there. And then the next day for a few more hours. And then the following day in a little more sun, so they get a little more wind. And by the 7th or 10th day, they have been acclimated more to those outdoor conditions. That's what hardening off refers to. And then, planting, kind of went through that. When you before you plant them, make sure that you water. So water is very important. Make sure that the garden space that you're watering them in is moist, has water, and then also the root of those transplants are sufficiently watered. Usually I have, a watering can or a bucket out there with a cup that I can make sure that the soil is thoroughly moistened with that. You can lightly fertilize with a soluble fertilizer, and this could be an organic one or an inorganic fertilizer. Just read the directions and apply that appropriately. Also good when you're planting to choose an evening or a cloudy day, because again, this is less stress for your new transplants. It would not be full sun, and again, the plants would be slowly introduced to outdoor environment. I kind of talked about separating your roots already. You want to get them away from circling around, and then water. Also applying a couple, 3 inches of an organic mulch after you plant something outside, like a shredded leaves would be a good practice as well. And we, again, have a nice tip sheet that goes through planting a smart vegetable garden on that same Gardening in Michigan website. So please check that out. Another nice tip, especially if you've had problems with what's called a cutworm in the past. Maybe you've come out the next day and the tops are just cut off and laying on the side. That would be a good indication of a cutworm, and those would be in the soil. And so using, half of a toilet roll paper or cutting paper towel roll and putting that down into the ground 2 inches will prevent the cutworms from being able to, crawl over the top of this and gain access to that stem, which they just want to cut off and destroy. Also good, as it mentions here, making a depression around your plant so that the soil will hold a little more moisture while those roots are developing is a good practice as well. And you can see here that they have a shredded mulch around this tomato plant too. And that really helps to reduce the stress on new plants because the mulch will create a more even soil temperature and will also reduce the amount of water that's going to evaporate from the soil. Also conserving water that way. And as we continue to have, questions whether or not the crops, if you choose to plant out this early, are they going to make it over the night? And if you have temperatures, these what are called cloches, French for a bell here, these are glass ones. They will only protect for a couple degrees, from freezing. They will only increase the temperature a couple of degrees. So be cautious again of that. But this is one way that you can extend your season. It does take extra effort on your part. I do use the milk jugs here. I cut off the bottoms of these so they can go over the new transplants. And another thing, you can see that the tops are open here, but on a colder night, I would leave the tops on because so that heat does not escape and the heat stays inside and protects the new seed transplants. You do want to be cautious if you're away during the day and there is a lot of sun and you've left the covers on for sure. This could bake your transplants as well. So it does take some monitoring because you have created your own little greenhouse around this, and the plant will need some venting. You don't want all that condensation on the leaves, etc. An extra layer of protection. Here you can see a PVC, but some people also use electrical conduit, forming the frame of which then we would place plastic over this. So that allows probably, another additional 5 degrees of protection in addition to the couple degrees that the milk jugs provide. So just some other tips there. Again, do want to get into the cool or warm season one. So Some of our cool season ones, we're at the cool temperatures. Some, can germinate at freezing. Even better are the 40-degree temperatures. But again, we're looking at what the soil temperatures are too. It will take the soil longer than at what our air temperatures have been. And then for the warm season ones, we want to wait until that soil warms up to, 65 plus degrees for some. So we do have a nice chart to show you different soil temperature conditions on our Gardening Michigan website as well. And just to show you some examples here, so for lettuce down here, it will germinate at a minimum, the seeds will, a minimum of 32 degrees. And that again is the soil temperature. But optimally, it's going to do much better at 60 to 75. And then maximum of 85. Versus if we go to a warm season vegetable like corn, it's not going to do too much, 50 or below. The seed will probably, may rot if there's too moist of a condition. It needs at least that 65 to 95 degrees in order for that corn seed to germinate. So important, no matter what zone you are, to look at what you're going to plant and then determine what that soil temperature is. There are soil temperature probes, but just sometimes feeling the soil. And then we also have our EnviroWeather resource too that will highlight what the growing degree days are as far as growing vegetables too. So that's a great resource for you to look at too. So, and for these, as far as your hardiness zone goes, all of these vegetables that we're going to talk about are annuals. So they don't have to have a certain, hardiness zone rating because they're not going to stay and live over the winter for you. So I'm going to be pointing out more what the temperatures they like during the growing season. For example, these cool season ones, again, are any of the greens or the pot herbs, anything that you can put into a pot and, cook up. Peas, another one. Cole crops, those are the ones that are in the broccoli family, cauliflower, kohlrabi, cabbage, root crops. All of these you can, seed at soil temperatures 45 to 50 degrees because they do like it cool. Radishes are another one you could plant out. Potatoes, seed potatoes are out in the garden centers now. And for like broccoli crops and those, there's usually transplants too, so you can direct plant those after you harden them off as well. So these are the ones you can get started a little bit earlier with. Some other ones, the greens, the rainbow Swiss chard, very colorful. You can eat those fresh or cook those up. There's some different varieties of small head lettuce out there, or cut and come again lettuce, where you can just shave them, cut them off, and new lettuce growth is going to grow. And lots of neat leaf lettuces out there too. So you're looking for those as seeds, and you can direct seed those into your garden. Some other great ones for cool temperatures are the spinach. Different options here. Smooth leaved on the left, and Savoy, very crinkly. So it gives you a different texture when you're eating that. And then just an easy, or maybe a lazy person's way of small gardening down here is to find a nice bag of soil mix. So it can't just be soil, but it has to have some mix in there. And so there's probably some perlite, because I see some white that look like styrofoam, but it's perlite. There's some organic material in there too, so that lightens it up. We've opened it up. and you just simply seed, you know, this is spinach, but it could be any type of leaf greens in here, and you can just harvest them from this bag. And then one thing with the greens too, as it heats up in the summer, having them in a container or maybe a part sunny area in your garden is beneficial, because that tends to keep them a little cooler so they won't bolt or go to flower as soon. And so you can move this, or if you have a container, move it out of the direct sun so you're able to maybe harvest it longer. There's also some, you can get some cultivars that are slow to bolt. You might want to look for those too. Here's some other ones that will really go well in, I know, my hardiness around. There's a lot of different zones in the, or, you know, climate in the UP. And so, you know, things that like it cool, because we have a shorter growing season too. Arugula is one of those. Kale really is quite hardy. And arugula, if you haven't used that, it's really good to put into a lettuce mix. It has like a peppery taste to it. Kale, everybody hopefully has heard of the health benefits of kale, and you can get that's not so curly, or sorry, the curly varieties as well. Here's some other photos of Swiss chard. It can get quite large for you, and all of this is edible too. Less to chew or less fibrous, the younger that these stems are, of course, but they're delicious, you know, cooked up as well. One thing, again, I want to show you just a very easy thing that you can grow, especially in smaller spaces. And this can be done, you know, frequently through your growing season, especially if you're using containers. This is just a window box, and you could plant a salad garden right in here. And what I've done is I've seeded spinach, but I've done also lettuce or the bok choy or kale. And then I use onion sets, which are available in your garden centers too. They're just small, like dried up onions, and put those into the box here. And you can be harvesting both of these to put into your salad. And so this is just a photo showing you would start, you know, the seeds indoors. This is the saran covering that was over the top. You can see that I needed a little more light. And then I want to show this condensation too, because if you are starting seeds, you want to slowly remove this plastic after you see the green, the germination starting. Slowly remove this cover so there isn't rot that's going to move in. You don't want the condensation, you know, staying on the leaves very long. And on the right here, this is just showing you, I took the saran wrap off, having some artificial lighting. You can see that some of these are starting to stretch a little. So you do need an artificial light, maybe an LED. They have LED grow lights, or you can use a warm or cool fluorescent bulb, both of those, warm and cool, and put that as close to your developing you know, plants as you can. Also, when it's you know, warm enough outside, you can also do this outside. And so to have a continual harvest of lettuce and greens, you'd want to seed them every 2 weeks, so you have a continuous supply. So you could have multiple salad boxes if you'd like. And then here over on the left is just showing you those onion sets. These are you know, onions that you would eat here, but the sets, you don't eat those. Again, those are a type of you know, propagation for starting new onions. Here's some more continuing the crops that do like it cool. Different cabbages that are out there. There's early cabbages. So again, you can extend your harvest time, and getting a late cabbage too. So you can be harvesting and eating an earlier cabbage while the late is still maturing too. Brussels sprouts, they do well even into snow. You can see a little snow here or frost. The flavor's actually better after they've been in a frost. Continuing on, we have lots of different types of broccoli. There's sprouting broccoli, broccolini too, so smaller heads out there. You can get the head broccoli. Here's a purple variety if you're looking for different colors. So again, be looking for those transplants once your soil location heats up. Again, 45, 50 degrees, these plants can stand that as long as they've been hardened off. Some other neat things that you can do too is to make use of all of your space. So here is an example where a different leaf lettuce is interplanted among the broccoli, and the broccoli is not mature yet. There's no heads, but the lettuce certainly is. And not only is the lettuce acting as a living mulch and shading out the soil surface area for, to deter weeds. So it's a living mulch here, but you're also making maximum use of your space. And so while you're harvesting some of this lettuce, the broccoli here still has plenty of space, and is maturing to its time that it can be harvested as well. So we like you to think of, different dimensions of the garden. There's the lower part where the root crops can grow. You can also, the middle section there, think of different plants that you can, use to cover all the space. And then there's a vertical aspect too. Sometimes this is a pretty common pest here, the cabbage looper or the white moths that are flying around and will lay their eggs that may develop into this cabbage looper or other green caterpillars. And just wanted to show you again, this is one way that you can try to exclude those moths from getting to your cabbages or your broccoli, and where you would have all those gushy green worms, and you don't want those caterpillars in there. So putting on this very lightweight row cover, you'd want to have some wire hoops here to help support the cover, so it isn't waving in the wind and wearing off the growing part of your plants. And this is the lightest weight, so moisture and about 80% of the sunlight does get through. So that's one option that you might want to take if you have had problems with a lot of green caterpillars on those types of crops. Here also peas are gonna like it cool, something that you can easily grow by seed. It has a harder seed coat, so soaking them for a couple hours in water before you plant them will help to break down that seed coat. But you do want to be mindful that those seeds do not dry out in your garden then. So you'd have to make sure that the area you plant in is thoroughly moistened, because once those seeds, if they've gotten wet, once they dry out, they're going to die. This is a neat photo here on the left, just that we took in one of our garden tours in England, just how they make use of different, twigs. That's their vertical support for their peas. So actually makes it quite artistic. And then the netting is to deter rabbits as well. So different ideas there. Definitely for your root crops, we suggest that you direct sow them, again, because you would be stressing out the transplants if you when you transplant these. So you can just simply direct seed them, and then oftentimes they do need to be thinned out because they might be growing too close together. So you might have smaller carrots that you can cook up or eat fresh or put in your salad. Same thing with beets and parsnips, turnips, but lots of different types of cultivars out there, from colors, shapes, etc. I always want to remind people too that it doesn't just need to be vegetables in the area, and the more diversity that you have, the better it is. You're not only confusing the bad insects that might want to attack your vegetables, but you're also inviting the good insects. So um, different herbs are going to have are a good thing to add diversity. And then flowers too are good. And there's some edible flowers um, that are out there as well. Herbs are going to have different temperature likes depending upon where they came from. Basil, being Mediterranean, really likes, it's more of a warm, but not in the heat of the summer. And so that's why it's helpful to interplant it between your tomatoes, because as the tomatoes grow up during the heat of the summer, they will help to shade out and stop the scorching that may occur on these basil leaves here. And then they're also great together. Basil, tomato can do great things there. Rosemary, moderate temperatures, even moisture, so not allowing the rosemary to dry out. And then dill, it's a great one to interplant among your cucumbers. You have it there then for your dill pickles. And then as this picture shows, allowing it to go to flower. Some of it is great as well, especially for those beneficial insects and pollinators too. A lot of them like these umbel-shaped flowers. So be mindful of that. And here's the edible flowers too. So think about interspersing some of those. And this rose is an example, is showing you the flowers that you should look for that the pollinators and the beneficial insects are going to like as well. You can see all the parts here. Those roses or plants that it's harder for them to get inside to get that food or that pollen. It's not as conducive for those pollinators. This one on the right here is called borage. It's a flower, it's edible, and parts of the plant, the leaves are, kind of gives a licorice taste. One thing you want to be careful of, this one does self-seed itself. So the next year, the seeds may survive and they'll pop up at different places around your garden. So if you don't like that aggressiveness, something to watch out for. But it's a pollinator magnet for sure. And as far as how do you find out what vegetables, like what temperature or different types that you can get. This is just showing you an example from Johnny Seeds, not promoting that, but just simply showing you there'll be other catalogs as well. It's a great way to do some background, maybe before you might go to a garden center, or if you're into buying your own seeds, looking at what they're specific to, the days to maturity as well. Like I mentioned, Upper Peninsula, we might only have 80 to 100 days in certain areas. Around the lake, it's a longer growing season, but and you down there have 120 days plus for your growing, so you don't have to worry too much about your days to maturity. But again, getting different cultivars, maybe some that are early, getting some that are mid-season, some that are late, will extend your harvest for you too. And they usually explain the different types that you can use them for, what they're best used for. And then we always want to point out disease resistant possibility too, especially I know with cucumbers, squash, we get a lot of questions, how do I get rid of this powdery mildew that always comes? Well, that's what this PM stands for. And there would be a key, in this particular catalog or in others that would tell you what each of these resistance stand for. The PM is for powdery mildew. And so one thing, if you continue to have that powdery mildew problem, is to look for those disease resistant cultivars for you. So just some other tips there. So getting into more of the warmer season ones now. These are some here, the Solanaceae, which is the tomato family. It's also the um, potatoes are in there. It's peppers are in that family. Eggplants are in that family. And typically, we're looking for transplants because it takes too long to put a seed out in the garden for us to get a tomato. So that's why we've started these already and inside for ourselves, or we're going to purchase these at a local greenhouse or garden center versus all these others, the beans, the vine crops, squash, melons, corn. They do well waiting for that temperature. 70 is better than 65, but waiting for that soil temperature to warm up to at least 65, 70 before we plant these seeds. And again, watering them in well. One other thing I want to mention too is that if you're not aware, crop rotation is important for your success too. So not planting the same crops in the same family in the same place for at least 3 years. So rotating your crops around, and what that does is confuses the bad insects or diseases that may be there already in the soil. And you're making them have to travel a little bit further to get what they like. And so that's what crop rotation um, means. And we have more information on that planting your vegetable garden as well, as far as, what, what family is this vegetable in too. So please check that out. Lots of different types of beans out there, and they do like it warm. This is another one that you would soak the seed for a couple hours, and that will help. Again, getting that soil moist when you plant those soaked beans as well. And here, yep, smart gardener using the crop rotation. Another thing, if you're out, and especially with kids too, a great thing to do, what makes them part of the same family is the reproductive parts. This is a potato here on the left, and if you would look closely, the flower, this one's white, but the flowers are very similar in the same family. This purple flower here is an eggplant, and if you would compare a flower of a potato to a tomato to an eggplant, they're going to be very similar, and therefore same family as well. And typically, plants in the same family are affected by similar pests and diseases. So that's why, using crop rotation will help reduce that. I always like to show planting potatoes, something I remember as a childhood too. And, when they're ready to harvest, it's kind of like digging for treasure. So great thing to do with children. Getting your soil temperature, that 50 degrees, so the seed potato doesn't rot before, is important. And I'm just showing you here on the right, this is a seed potato. You don't use the same potatoes that you eat. There's actually seed potatoes, and so they're certified for you. You want to be sure that these little sprouts here, or even a sprout or an eye, you'd want to have at least one of those for them to sprout into your potato. Usually I place the cut side down because this is going to be a stem growing up. And yeah, I just use a knife here. This is a closer up of that, where you could actually split this seed potato in half. So an eye would be on each part of it to plant. Lots of different types of potatoes out there too, from the early red ones. Yukon Golds are actually a gold color. Those are a little earlier. And then the russets usually are a little bit larger. Those are keepers, sometimes keep through the whole winter with the right conditions. These down below, an heirloom fingerling types are out there, so different colors as well, and shaped like fingers, so they're bite size at times. Tomatoes, again, the same family, lots of different types that you can You can plant something for beginners. Be aware of indeterminate tomatoes because they just continue to grow and grow and grow. And so your harvest will just continue on into the growing season versus a tomato that's a determinate type will produce only at a set point for you. It ends its growth. So especially if you have space considerations, look for those that are determinate. There's also patio types that are better for containers for you as well. And then, the size of tomatoes, lots of different shapes out there. And the little cherry or grape or cherry tomatoes, always great to pick fresh with the family or children as well. Peppers, lots of different peppers too, and we'd be planting those as transplants, and they do like it warm, so wait for that 65, 70 degree temperature. Same thing with your eggplant, and that'd be something neat you could do as a family as well, planning the garden, making a map, and pictures also tell a thousand words. So something that the children could get involved with. They can also maybe pick out different types of plants. There's different unusual ones as well, but that's part of the fun too. As you can see, eggplants, purple varieties. There's small white ones. Great ways to involve everybody. Really wanted to bring to note too the need for water and smart watering practices as well. Um, and this is another tip sheet that's available on our Gardening in Michigan website. As this photo is showing, this overhead sprinkler, we would suggest that you do this only in the AM, so in the morning, so that by evening or dusk, when the sun has already gone down, that these leaves have dried off, and there's less chance of disease affecting these plants than when there's dry leaves. There's a lot of fungus that like that moisture on the leaves. And then if you can, using drip irrigation or watering at the base where the plant is really going to need it, the roots are what's going to take up the majority of that water. So that's a very smart and efficient practice, using a soaker hose. And then also, don't forget the use of an organic mulch, after you plant. That is really going to help cut down your weeds and conserve moisture as well. Lots of different types of cucumbers out there. So another thing that you could try, from the slicing one here to a pickling one that looks a little past the pickling, but there's a yellow cucumber, and then the longer, there's English. I like to look for the burpless varieties myself, but lots of neat things that you can try there. And then just like to remind people too, we often get questions about cucumbers, that they have flowers. My plants have flowers, but there's no fruit on them. And typically they have different flowers. And so the male flowers, which look like this on the left, are going to come out maybe 2 weeks before the female flowers even come out. And the female does have the fruit behind it. That's where the ovary and the fruit is going to develop on there. So don't panic if you have flowers and you're not seeing that fruit, because the male are going to come out first. And then again, just including a photo of some of my sunflowers here. That's always a great thing to attract the pollinators and then birds after for the seeds too, or you could harvest them to eat. Putting flowers around there that are going to attract the pollinators, beneficial insects, it's really a positive. Lots of different bulb crops that you can try out. I mentioned the green onion, which would be the spring onion here. You just simply are harvesting the onion before it gets mature. For garlic, you typically want to plant that in October. And that overwinters, it grows under the ground, and then we harvest it the next summer in June. But there's other, leeks are an option for you. Chives are going to be a perennial for you. Those will tend to pop up in different places too as they spread their seed. But again, another pollinator magnet as well for their flowers. And then this is again just showing there's different types of onions out there, from the yellow, white. Usually we are getting long day. We're planting long day onions, and have some that are going to be be able to keep into our winter, versus the sweet, um, which typically grow in the south. I like to plant red onions as well. They go well in sandwiches and salads too. On the left, just showing you a picture. This would be early in the year, like February, when you would, start onions. You could try to start onions from seed. And then you actually would be transplanting those. Looking into some more warm crops, the squash, pumpkin, just showing you a difference here on the left, the winter squash. So these are varieties that will keep longer. Pumpkins, the butter cup, and then we have acorn squash over here. These all have a harder rind on them, so they keep for longer than, say, the summer squash, which is zucchini, or the crookneck ones. Those do not have the hard cover, and need to be, eaten or used in a shorter period than the winter. But all of these like it quite warm. Here again, I've kind of pointed out the use of mulch, but here's a few more resources for you. Very beneficial to use some mulch. Oftentimes people under larger squash may use moistened newspaper underneath, like a clean straw. Really helps to keep the fruit off of the soil. And then just using the mulch too will help prevent, if there are some diseases in your soil, from that splashing up onto your plants, because you have this 3-inch layer of mulch down there as well. So very smart practice for you, and does help to save the time that you're going to have to weed and then water as well. So here's just showing you some of the early squash. If you've ever done zucchini in great years, usually you have much more than you need, as we see in the pile down here. And just again showing you, the option for putting down some mulch there. When you pick it young, definitely, is more tender than when it gets the hard shell, but nothing wrong with, using some of that for bread, or there's a lot of different recipes even using it, the squash itself. Melons, something fun too. I know as a child, I always wanted, the biggest watermelon in here. Yeah, we're up in a cold part, so the best luck that we have is getting one of these earlier maturing, smaller ones. But that would be a fun thing to do with your children, is to start melons. You could even do that still now, because they like a temperature of at least 95 degrees, the seeds, to start. And so you could start those inside and get a head start planting them outside as well. But lots of great different, cultivars here, colors, shapes that you can try. Sweet corn is another one I know that I look forward to. And this one, again, likes it warm. Lots of great advances with having corn sweet. So I know with many of these bicolored ones, the 2-colored, you could eat right off of the cob. It doesn't necessarily even need to be cooked, because the sugar content is so high in there. And again, this is one where you could plant, an earlier, like a 56-day maturing one, all the way up to later, like an 80-day, to extend the time that you would have sweet corn for you. But you do need to have, some space for the sweet corn. Just want to remind people too, we talked a little bit about insects, and there will be insects, hopefully. So there's life out there, showing a lot of, bad ones, we could say over here on the left. But as I mentioned, there's a lot of good ones. And so we do have some helpful pocket guides. This would be neat too, to go out as a family and maybe see what you could spot. And just from beneficial ladybugs, lacewings, seeing what nature may be doing out there positively to try to fend off some of these bad guys. And again, being mindful that the good guys and gals are going to need some of the bad ones in order to eat. So having that natural cycle is important. We do have these available. They are water resistant. We have some different ones too that identify plants too, but this is a neat one, to identify the natural enemies or the beneficials out there. So check that out. And then, of course, just a lot of, benefits from enjoying the fruits of your labor. And I hope you have a very successful year gardening. Please feel free to reach out to us. I have a number of different resources here. Again, we have our Gardening in Michigan website. We also have our toll-free MSU Extension Lawn and Garden hotline, which is available half time now. And here's the 1-888-678-3464 number. It is Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 9 to noon Eastern Standard Time. So we've been getting some great questions and willing to help you out there. We also have an online Ask Extension resource where you can upload your lawn and garden questions and photos, maybe for identification or what's going on here. And again, that's available 24/7, and you can reach that at our Gardening in Michigan website. And then these tip sheets are just the ones that I had shared with you online as well. And a couple other things, online classes. If you want to learn more about vegetables, this is available as an online self-paced course year-round. So it's $30 and over 6 hours worth of videos of lecture explaining all about introductory beginning, vegetable gardening, and then we have additional resources for you as well. So you can check that out. And then again, if you're interested in more intensive learning, we do offer the Extension Master Gardener program. We have classes ongoing right now, but would start another round in the fall. And this is a great way, going to the website to look at your area to see if that is available. It is an intense program, offered 14 weeks, but a great way, and it is a volunteer training program as well. So there's the educational part and then the volunteer part to become certified as a master gardener. So invite anybody to check that out as well. And with that, that's an introduction to vegetable gardening.
Yes, Rebecca, thank you so much in the best possible way. I'm completely overwhelmed by all the knowledge. I'm really looking forward to going and looking at some of the resources that you shared with us because as I told you earlier, my husband and I are really novice gardeners or vegetable gardeners, and we're trying to do better. So I think a lot of this information will be helpful for us.
Excellent. That's what we like to hear. Yeah, and more people are, I don't know if it was, well, COVID had us shut in a lot last year, but it was continuing to grow even before that, the interest in knowing how to, grow our own food as well and having that fresh capability. So.
Yeah, it always feels really good to just be able to go and pick your own food and bring it in to cook up or eat fresh and raw.
Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, just your accomplishment too. It's like, oh my gosh, I did this.
Yes, 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 yes. All
Okay.
right, wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
You're
And
welcome.
We will be posting this recording up on the library's webpage. I'm going to go ahead and pause us now.